Alright, so numbers, let's pick up now, let's do number 7 together. And I'm going to kind of go at your pace. You have some experience doing these already. So, you know. And if you're going the wrong direction, I'll let you know. But we're given vertex form at y equals negative 3x squared plus 12. We need to fill in all the other pieces. So, yeah, what do we want to do? Okay, so we can factor this to get it into factored form. Typically, you can't go from vertex form to factored form easily, but in this case, we can. Anybody know why? It's already in standard form. This usually you go to factored form from standard form, but when will vertex form and standard form always be the same? When there's no linear term, and so we know that standard form is y equals negative 3x squared plus 12, and then we can factor that. If we were going to factor that, what would be your first step? Factor out the negative 3. And if you factor out the negative 3, what's left? X squared minus 4. And then we can, that's a difference of 2 squares. We could factor that to x plus 2 times x minus 2. And now we have our 3 forms already. We got standard, factored, and vertex form. All right, we're well on our way. What else could we find? Y-intercept, how do we find that? Okay, so if you plug in 0 for x and solve for y, you end up with y is 12, because this term is 0, and so 0, 12. And, you know, in general, if you're in standard form, your constant term c will always end up being your y-intercept. Okay. All right, what now? What next? And Lindsay. Okay, what's the vertex? 0, 12. And how are you getting that? Where are you looking? So your vertex is typically HK, right? And so that's, you're looking at you're comparing our form to the vertex form equation and seeing that H is 0, K is 12. And, you know, where the people can get mixed up here is there's two numbers, there's a negative 3 and a 12. And you got to realize that, okay, A is my negative 3, because that's in front of the x squared. And then the 12, how do we know if that's the h or the k? Right? And notice h is also squared with the x. And so this is the part after. So k is going to be 12. And if I rewrote this, this could be y equals negative 3 x minus 0 squared plus 12. So if you want to see your a, your h, and your k, you could put x minus 0. But by default, if you have an x squared, h is 0. Okay, good. What else can we find? X-intercepts, how do we do that? Plug in 0 for y, good. So how many factors do we have? We had 3, but only 2 of them really matter because the factors with your x values are the ones that are going to give you your x-intercept. So x plus 2, 0 gives us x is negative 2, and x minus 2 equals 0 is going to give us x equals positive 2. So negative 2 comma 0 and positive 2 comma 0 are our two x-intercepts. Good. What's next? Axis of symmetry. And we can have a graph here if we want. So if I plot a couple points here, my vertex right here, 0, 12, my x-intercepts, -2, 0, and +2, 0. Axis of symmetry is going to be what? 0. 0 is a number, not a line. X equals 0. Good. I'm just drilling you because I see a lot of people do that, right? Actually write 0 and don't put x equals 0. So I'm reminding you guys it's got to be an equation of a line. And so now we have 3 points, but I want 5 points on the graph. So what do you do if you're missing some points? Pick your favorite x value, plug it in, but my advice is keep your x value close to the axis of symmetry. So what do you want to pick for x? 1, okay. So if x is 1, I'm going to plug 1 into any of my equations. It doesn't matter which one, whichever one looks easiest to you. Plug a 1 in and get an answer. I got a little space here, so I'll plug in 1 here. And I get 9. So 1, 9. And if you find a point to the right of the axis of symmetry, you automatically have a matching point on the left side. So -1, 9 is going to work for us. And then draw your parabola. Make sure it's rounded, not pointed. Fill in our points here. And domain is going to be all real numbers. And remember, domain deals with your x values. The range is going to be all y values less than or equal to 12. Because you're looking at your y-axis and saying, okay, what's the height of my parabola? The max is 12 and everything below, right? So, and then increasing, decreasing, your axis of symmetry in this case cuts right down the y-axis. And everything to the left is either going to be increasing or decreasing, and then the right will go the other direction. So the left side is what? Increasing. Well, are you sure? Because if I'm at the top and I trace it it looks like it's dropping, doesn't it? But I'm going the wrong direction. Okay, so that's why you have to trace it from left to right like you're reading a book, and then it's going up. So make sure you're going the right direction. So this is increasing and then decreasing on the right side. So increasing when x is less than 0. Decreasing when x is greater than 0. And now we've filled out all that we need. Okay. Number 8 is going to be assigned to you for homework. Just one caution here on number 8. Is the vertex form and standard form going to be the same? No, it's going to look different. And so when you multiply this out, you got to follow order of operations. So the first thing you do is what? You're going to have to multiply x plus 3 times another x plus 3. Distribute all that out. A little bit of work there. After you get that answer, what do? Multiply it all by 2. And then subtract 8. So make sure you follow the order of operations on that one. All right, let's also at the bottom of this page, make sure you answer this question. How can you tell if the graph of a parabola will have a maximum or a minimum? Just by looking at one form of the equation. Okay. So next, let's do number 9 together. I'll give you a few minute head start on 9. Okay. All right, so number 9, you guys got a head start. For your y-intercept, you plug in x equals 0. What are we getting? Y equals 4, 0, 4. Factored form, you want to factor out a negative 4 from both terms, and you get an x squared minus 1. And you factor further, and you get negative 4 times x plus 1, x minus 1. And for your zeros, you set y equal to 0 and solve for x. And to solve for x, you set your individual factors with x equal to 0. You get two answers, negative 1 and positive 1. Your line of symmetry is going to be right in between those zeros. And so it's actually going to end up being x equals 0. Your vertex will always have the same x value as your line of symmetry, which will be 0. And if you plug in 0, you get 4, which is the same as our y-intercept, because that's how you find a y-intercept. You plug in 0 for x. And this is a special case where our standard form and vertex form will end up being the same. So you can write it like that, or you can write it as negative 4x squared plus 4. Doesn't matter. And the reason they're the same is because, again, we're missing a linear term. So when you're graphing, our highest point is going to be at 4. And then at 1, 0, negative 1, 0. But we only have 3 points, so we need to come up with some more. What did you guys pick for x? 2's good one. You picked 5? 0.5. Okay. 0.5 you could do. We're just going to have decimals, right? But why not go for 2? I'm going to go for 2. So if I plug in a 2 for x, what am I going to get for y? So a little scratch work here. Y is going to equal negative 4 times 2 squared plus 4. And that's going to be negative 4 times 4 plus 4. That's negative 16 plus 4, which is negative 12. So when I plug in a 2, I get negative 12. I'm just going to put a point down here and call it 2, negative 12 here. And there's going to be a matching point at negative 2, negative 12. And I'm going to fill in what I have for points. Domain, you should get all real numbers. Range, all y values. What do you get? Less than or equal to 4. It's increasing when x is less than 0 and decreasing when x is greater than 0. Okay. Number 10, I'm going to leave for you to do for homework. Any question, guys, on number 9 before we leave it? So the last one I want to do together is number 11. Okay, 11, we start in standard form. And we work from there, and I want to, again, work together with you guys on this one. And so how would you start on number 11? Try to factor. Okay? And when we try to factor, you're gonna multiply a times c together. And what do we get when we multiply a times c? Negative 63. And you're going to put b down here, which is negative 18. And you're looking for two numbers that multiply to AC and add to b. So two numbers that multiply to negative 63 and add to negative 18. Mac's already got it. What do you got, Mac? 21 and 3. Are any of them negative? Okay. Other way around? Negative 21 and positive 3? Okay. And so we could factor this. So we got y equals 9x squared minus 18x minus 7. And then we're going to split up the middle term to minus 21x plus 3x minus 7. And then we factor by grouping the first half. We could factor out a what? A 3x. And what's left? Minus 7. And then the last two terms, what would you factor out? A plus 1. We're going to get another 3x minus 7. And then look at these two terms, and we can factor out a 3x minus 7. And we're left with a 3x plus 1. And we factored it. So the factoring here is a little more challenging than the previous ones. But you guys have done that kind of factoring already. We've had practice, and we're continuing to practice. Very important that we can factor well. Okay, what now? Set y equal to 0. You're finding the zeros? What are we going to get for our zeros? Fractions, yay! Fractions are our friends, right? So 3x minus 7 equals 0, and 3x plus 1 equals 0. So we get 3x is 7, so x is 7/3, and x is negative 1/3. So one of my zeros is 7/3, comma 0, and the other one's going to be negative 1/3, comma 0. And 7/3, how many times does 3 go into 7? Twice. So that, I mean, that's 2 1/3, okay? So when you're graphing, it's easier to think of it as a mixed fraction or a decimal when you're graphing to find its location. So 2 1/3 is between 2 and 3. All right, so we have our zeros. Yeah, they may look a little intimidating to you. It's not going to be too bad, though. What else can we do? All right, we can find our y-intercept. We set x equal to 0 and plug it in. We end up with 9 times 0 squared minus 18 times 0 minus 7. And what do we get? Negative 7, because this is 0 and that's 0, and we got 0 and negative 7. Nice. Find the vertex next. How do we do that? Okay, so we know that the axis of symmetry, or the line of symmetry, is right in between our two zeros. And here we have a fraction, so we got to find out, well, what is right in between 7/3 and negative 1/3? And so a little bit of scratch work here. I'm going to do it up here. So 7/3. How do you find the middle? What do I do with the numbers? Add them together. So 7/3 plus a negative 1/3. and then I divide that by 2. We got to figure out what that is. And so that's going to give us 6/3 over 2, which is 2 over 2. Mr. Marsh made it work out nice right now. Eventually it won't. Okay. Right now it is still working out okay. So what's our axis or line of symmetry? X equals 1. Nice. And then we know that the x value for the line of symmetry is the same as the x value for our vertex. And so we can now find our vertex by plugging in 1 into one of our equations. It could be factored form or you could do standard form. Which one would you rather do? I heard factored form, so let's do that. So for factored form, I get y equals 3 times 1, which is 3, minus 7. As one factor, and then the other factor is going to be 3 times 1 plus 1. So that's going to be negative 4 times a positive 4, which is negative 16. And we have a vertex at 1, negative 16. Question? From here. I plugged in 1 for x. And when you plug in 1, it's 3 times 1 is 3. Okay. Where would you guys like to go now? Graphing, okay. So I got to prepare, I got to think ahead here. Okay, my lowest point's at negative 16. And so I need to leave myself a lot of room on the bottom part. I'm going to drop down 16. So 1. I'm going to give myself some space with the x-axis. I'm going to really space it out because I got fractions involved here. So I'm going to go to 1, negative 16 right here. My lowest point there. My zeros, negative 1/3. So here's negative 1. So negative 1/3 is about right here. It's in between 0, and negative 1, closer to 0. 7/3 is 2 1/3. So here's 2, here's 3. So 2 1/3 is about right there. Closer to 2, in between 2 and 3. And then we have an y-intercept at 0, negative 7. And so there's going to be a matching point at what location? Here's our axis of symmetry. So on the other side at 2, negative 7. And now we can draw our sketch our graph. Go ahead and finish it. Find all the remaining parts.